Daniel Chen woke up at 5 in the morning to the sound of his alarm, the same way he did every single day. The sun hadn't even thought about rising yet, but he was already pulling on his work clothes in the dark, trying not to wake his 8-year-old daughter sleeping in the next room. He paused at her doorway for a moment, watching her small form curled up under her favorite blanket with the stars on it. That blanket used to belong to her mother, 3 years. It had been 3 years since he lost his wife, and some mornings it still didn't feel real. The pregnancy complications had come out of nowhere, fast and brutal, taking both his wife and their unborn son in the span of 48 hours. One day they were painting the nursery blue, laughing about baby names. 2 days later, Daniel was a widower and single father standing in a hospital corridor wondering how he was supposed to keep breathing. But he did keep breathing, because his daughter needed him. Little Lily needed breakfast and help with homework and someone to braid her hair, even though he was terrible at it. She needed goodnight kisses and silly jokes and a parent who showed up every single time. So Daniel showed up. His first job was at a medical supply warehouse on the edge of town. He spent his days counting inventory, loading boxes, and managing shipments of everything from bandages to hospital beds. The work was steady, but the pay was just okay. Not enough for a single dad trying to cover rent, groceries, school supplies, and the mountain of bills that never seemed to stop growing. So 3 nights a week, after he picked Lily up from her after-school program and made sure she had dinner and finished her homework, Daniel would tuck her into bed and head back out into the night. His second job was driving for a rideshare company. He'd turn on the app and spend 4 or 5 hours ferrying drunk college students home from bars, taking tired nurses to their late shifts, and listening to business travelers complain about airline delays. The work was exhausting and sometimes depressing. But the extra money meant Lily could take her art classes, and he could keep the lights on. On this particular evening, Daniel sat in his car in a grocery store parking lot, waiting for his next ride request to pop up. His back ached from lifting boxes all day, and he was nursing his 3rd cup of gas station coffee. He should have been home sleeping, but the electricity bill was due and it was higher than usual this month. He scrolled through his phone mindlessly, too tired to focus on much. That's when he saw the article. It was from the local news station's website, and the headline read something about the desperate need for kidney donors in the region. Daniel almost scrolled past it. He was tired. He had his own problems, and reading about other people's medical crises wasn't exactly relaxing. But something made him stop. Maybe it was the photo showing a young mother holding her kids, or maybe it was just the look in her eyes that reminded him of his own desperate days in the hospital. He clicked on the article and started reading. The story talked about how thousands of people were stuck on waiting lists, sometimes for years, hoping a kidney would become available before it was too late. It showed faces of real people, their families, their stories. One man was a teacher who could barely make it through a school day anymore. A woman in her 30s had 2 young kids and was running out of time. An older gentleman who'd worked construction his whole life was now too weak to walk across a room. Daniel read every word. He learned about living donors, people who voluntarily gave one of their kidneys to someone else. The article explained that most people can live perfectly healthy lives with just 1 kidney, and that living donors often gave recipients a better chance than waiting for a deceased donor. There was a quote from a doctor saying that 1 living donor could save a life and give an entire family their loved one back. Something shifted in Daniel's chest. He sat there in his idling car, staring at those faces on his phone screen, and thought about his wife. He thought about how helpless he'd felt, sitting in that waiting room unable to do anything while the doctors fought to save her. He'd never felt so useless in his entire life. All his strength, all his willingness to do anything, and none of it mattered. He couldn't save her. He couldn't even hold her hand in those final moments because everything happened so fast. But maybe, just maybe, he could save someone else. The idea seemed crazy at first. He was barely keeping his head above water financially, working 2 jobs just to make ends meet. How could he possibly take time off for surgery? How would he pay the bills during recovery? What if something went wrong and he couldn't work at all? What would happen to Lily? But the thought wouldn't leave him alone. Over the next few days, between shifts and school pickups and bedtime stories, Daniel kept thinking about those faces from the article. He did more research, reading about the donation process, the risks, the recovery time. He learned that most donors were back to normal activities within 4 to 6 weeks, and that serious complications were rare. He read testimonials from donors who said giving a kidney was the most meaningful thing they'd ever done. He started looking at his budget, trying to figure out if he could make it work. It would be tight. Really tight. He'd have to use what little savings he had. Maybe ask his boss at the warehouse for some unpaid leave, cut back on everything possible. But people did hard things all the time, right? And what was a few weeks of financial stress compared to giving someone their life back? 3 weeks after reading that article, Daniel walked into a donor evaluation center. He felt nervous and a little foolish. A working-class guy in his old jeans and work boots, surrounded by medical professionals in a fancy clinic. But the staff treated him with kindness and respect, explaining every step of the process. They took his medical history, drew what felt like 100 vials of blood, and scheduled him for additional tests. The waiting was the hardest part. Daniel went through batteries of tests over the next month. Physical exams, psychological evaluations, more blood work, imaging scans. They wanted to make sure he was healthy enough to donate and that he understood what he was signing up for. Every time he went to an appointment, he had to arrange for a neighbor to watch Lily or shuffle his work schedule around. His boss at the warehouse was understanding but clearly annoyed by all the time off requests. Finally, the call came. Daniel was at home making dinner, helping Lily with her math homework at the kitchen table when his phone rang. The coordinator on the other end of the line sounded excited. His test results were excellent. He was approved as a donor. Even better, they had a recipient who was a match for him, someone with a rare blood type who'd been waiting for a long time. Without a transplant soon, this person wouldn't make it, so what do you think? The coordinator asked. Are you ready to move forward? Daniel looked at his daughter, her tongue sticking out in concentration as she worked through a subtraction problem. He thought about the lessons he wanted to teach her, about kindness and courage and doing the right thing even when it's hard. He thought about the person on the other end of this decision, someone he'd never met who was running out of time just like his wife had. Yes, he said, let's do it. The coordinator explained that the recipient preferred to remain anonymous, which was common. Some people felt too overwhelmed by the gift to meet their donor, at least right away. Daniel didn't mind. He wasn't doing this for recognition or gratitude. He was doing it because someone needed help and he could give it. That night, after Lily was asleep, Daniel sat on the edge of his bed and let himself feel the weight of what he'd just agreed to. He was scared. Scared of the surgery, scared of the bills, scared of what would happen if something went wrong, but he was also weirdly calm. For the first time since his wife died, he felt like he was doing something that really mattered. The surgery was scheduled for 6 weeks out. Daniel spent that time preparing. He told Lily that he was going to help someone very sick get better by sharing part of himself with them. She was young, but she understood. She made him a card with crayon drawings of hearts and wrote, "My daddy is a hero," in wobbly letters. He put it on the refrigerator where he could see it every day. His small community rallied around him in ways that surprised him. When word got out about what he was doing, neighbors offered to bring meals during his recovery. His co-worker at the warehouse started a small fund to help with expenses. The parent coordinator at Lily's school arranged for free after-school care during the weeks he'd be recovering. People he barely knew reached out with offers of help. The night before the surgery, Daniel lay in bed thinking about the stranger who would receive his kidney. He wondered what they were like if they had kids, what they did for a living, whether they were scared too. He hoped they were good people, but he realized it didn't really matter. Everyone deserved to live. Everyone deserved a second chance. As he drifted off to sleep, Daniel whispered a quiet prayer to his wife wherever she was. He hoped she was proud of him. He hoped she knew that even though he couldn't save her, he was trying to save someone else, and maybe in some small way, that would help fill the hole her loss had left in his heart. Victoria Ashford stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office on the 42nd floor, looking down at the city below. From up here, people looked like ants, ours like toys. Everything seemed small and manageable from this height. If only her problems were as easy to control. At 38 years old, Victoria was one of the most successful businesswomen in the country. Her company, Ashford Hospitality Group, owned over 300 restaurants across 15 states. What had started as a single struggling diner she'd bought with borrowed money at age 23 had grown into an empire worth billions. Her face had been on magazine covers, She'd given TED Talks about business strategy. She had more money than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. And she was dying. The polycystic kidney disease had been lurking in her body for years, silent and patient. By the time doctors caught it, both kidneys were failing fast. No amount of money could buy her way out of this one. Sure, she had access to the best doctors in the world, private hospital rooms that looked like luxury hotel suites, and enough resources to try every treatment available. But she couldn't buy her way to the top of the transplant list. That wasn't how it worked. Her rare blood type meant finding a match was like winning a lottery she couldn't rig. For the first time in her adult life, Victoria was powerless and she hated it. She'd built her entire life on control. Growing up poor in a rundown apartment with a single mother who worked 3 jobs, Victoria had learned early that the only person she could count on was herself. At 15, she lied about her age to get a job as a waitress at a 24-hour diner. She worked nights and weekends, saving every dollar while other kids her age were going to parties and football games. By 18, she'd saved enough to start community college, still working full-time at the diner. She studied business during the day and served coffee and pie at night, sleeping maybe 4 hours if she was lucky. Her mother told her she was crazy, that she should just find a nice man to marry and settle down. But Victoria had seen what depending on others got you. It got you abandoned, struggling, and stuck. At 23, when the diner's owner was about to close down and sell, Victoria approached him with a proposal. She'd saved up a small down payment, and she convinced a bank to give her a loan for the rest. The owner thought she was nuts, but he sold it to her anyway. Everyone expected her to fail within a year. Instead, she transformed the place. She upgraded the menu, improved efficiency, created a warm atmosphere that kept customers coming back. Within 3 years, she'd paid off the loan and opened a second location. Then a third. Then she started franchising. By 30, she had 20 restaurants. By 35, she was running a multi-million-dollar corporation. But success came at a cost. Relationships fell by the wayside. She'd had a few boyfriends over the years, but they always ended the same way. They couldn't handle her ambition, her work hours, her refusal to put them first. Her last serious relationship ended 5 years ago when her partner gave her an ultimatum, him or the business. She chose the business. She always chose the business. Her family relationships weren't much better. Her mother passed away 4 years ago, proud of Victoria's success but sad they'd grown so distant. Her younger brother barely spoke to her anymore, resentful that she'd abandoned the family in her climb to the top. She had employees and business associates but no real friends. Who had time for friends when you were building an empire? Now facing her mortality, Victoria realized she'd built a beautiful prison. She had everything money could buy and no one to share it with. No one to hold her hand in the hospital. No one who loved her for herself, rather than what she could do for them. The diagnosis had come 6 months ago during a routine executive physical. Her doctor noticed some concerning numbers in her blood work and ordered more tests. When he called her with the results, his voice was gentle but serious. Both kidneys were failing. She needed a transplant, and soon. Without one, she had maybe a year, probably less. Victoria's first response was to throw money at the problem. She hired the best specialists, demanded second and third opinions, looked into experimental treatments, but the answer was always the same. She needed a new kidney, and finding a match with her rare blood type was going to be extremely difficult. As weeks turned into months and her condition worsened, Victoria started dialysis. 3 times a week, she'd sneak away from the office to sit in a medical chair for 4 hours, while a machine cleaned her blood. She told her executives she was in important meetings. She couldn't let them see her weak. Weakness was dangerous in her world, but the dialysis was taking its toll. She was exhausted all the time. Her skin looked gray and she'd lost weight. Her assistant kept suggesting she slow down, take time off, but Victoria refused. Work was all she had. If she stopped working, she'd have to face the emptiness of her life. One particularly bad day, about 4 months into her diagnosis, Victoria felt like she was drowning. She'd just come from a difficult dialysis session and had 2 more hours of virtual meetings scheduled. She was sitting in her car in the hospital parking garage, feeling weaker than she'd ever felt when she just broke down crying. Proper ugly crying, something she hadn't done since she was a teenager. She couldn't go back to the office like this. She couldn't go home to her empty penthouse apartment. She needed to be somewhere, anywhere where she could just exist without being Victoria Ashford. CEO and boss and decision-maker. On impulse, she drove to a small neighborhood near the hospital that she'd passed 100 times but never really noticed. It was the kind of working-class area she'd grown up in, with modest houses and local shops. She spotted a little diner, the kind of place that probably hadn't changed its menu since the 1980s. Perfect, but she couldn't walk in looking like herself. Her face had been in business magazines and newspapers. Someone might recognize her, might want to talk business or ask for investments or treat her like the CEO she was. She needed to be invisible. In the back of her car, she kept a gym bag that she'd been meaning to take home for weeks. Inside was an old baseball cap, an oversized hoodie, and cheap sunglasses. She pulled her hair back, put on the cap, and looked at herself in the rearview mirror. Without her usual designer clothes and perfect makeup, she looked like any tired, middle-aged woman. Just another face in the crowd. She walked into that diner and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Anonymous. Nobody looked twice at her. The waitress seated her at the counter without any special treatment. The menu was printed on laminated paper with gravy stains. The coffee came in a thick ceramic mug that had probably been there since the place opened. Victoria ordered pie and coffee and just sat there, watching people. A construction worker on his lunch break. An elderly couple sharing a piece of cake. A young mother trying to eat while her toddler colored on paper placemats. Normal people living normal lives, finding small joys in simple things. She stayed for 2 hours and nobody bothered her. When she finally left, she gave the waitress a $100 tip on a $12 check. The woman's eyes went wide and she started to say something, but Victoria just smiled and walked out. That diner became her secret refuge. 2 or 3 times a week after dialysis or between meetings, Victoria would put on her disguise and return. She became Vicky, a quiet regular who always sat at the counter, always ordered coffee and pie, and always left generous tips. The staff probably thought she was a little odd, but they were kind to her in a way nobody in her real life was anymore. They were kind because they wanted to be, not because she was paying them or because they wanted something from her. One evening, a few weeks into her secret visits, Victoria overheard 2 waitresses talking near the kitchen. One was crying softly, explaining how her hours had been cut and she didn't know how she was going to pay for her daughter's school supplies. Without thinking, Victoria pulled out $500 bills from her wallet and left them under her coffee cup with a simple note. For the school supplies. You're a good mom. She left before the waitress found it, but through the window she watched the woman discover the money. The look on her face, that mixture of shock and relief and gratitude, did something to Victoria. For the first time in years, her money had meant something beyond business deals and profit margins. During this time, Victoria was on the transplant waiting list, but her doctors weren't optimistic. Her blood type was rare and she was getting weaker. They gently suggested she might want to reach out to family or friends about living donors, but Victoria couldn't bring herself to do it. Her brother barely spoke to her. She had no close friends, and asking an employee felt wrong, like coercion. Then, 4 months after her diagnosis, the call came. They'd found a match, a living donor, someone who'd volunteered to give a kidney to a stranger, someone who'd been tested and approved and was willing to go through surgery for someone they'd never met. Victoria was in her office when she got the news. She thanked the coordinator calmly, hung up, and then sat very still for a long time. A stranger was giving her a piece of themselves. Someone who owed her nothing, who didn't know who she was literally giving her life. She tried to find out who it was, but the program protected donor anonymity unless both parties agreed to meet. The donor had chosen to remain anonymous for now, and Victoria had to respect that. All she knew was that it was a man, that he was healthy, and that the surgery was scheduled. In 3 weeks. She had 3 weeks to prepare for a second chance at life, given to her by someone she'd never met. Victoria spent those weeks in a strange fog. She went through the motions at work, preparing her second-in-command to take over during her recovery. She put her affairs in order, updated her will, made arrangements, but mostly she thought about the donor. Who volunteers to give away an organ? What kind of person does that? Someone good, obviously. Someone probably much better than her. The night before the surgery, Victoria went back to the diner one last time. She sat at her usual spot at the counter, wearing her usual disguise, and ordered her usual coffee and pie. She looked around at the tired waitresses, the regulars, The ordinary people living their ordinary lives, and she felt a pang of envy. These people had something she'd lost somewhere along the way. They had connections, community, purpose beyond profit. The waitress who usually served her, a kind woman in her 50s, noticed she seemed sad. "You okay, honey?" she asked gently. Victoria nodded, not trusting her voice. The waitress patted her hand. "Whatever you're going through, it'll get better. Just hang in there." Such simple words, but they made Victoria's eyes sting with tears. When was the last time someone had shown her kindness without wanting anything in return? When was the last time someone had called her honey and meant it? She left $1,000 under her plate that night, along with a note that said simply, "Thank you for making me feel human again." As Victoria drove to the hospital for pre-surgery admission, she made herself a promise. If she survived this, if this stranger's gift gave her more time, she wouldn't waste it. She'd figure out how to be more than just a CEO. She'd learn how to be a person again. She just had no idea that the man giving her his kidney was someone whose path she'd already crossed, sitting in that same diner she loved, living the kind of simple, meaningful life she'd given up long ago. The morning of the surgery, Daniel woke up before his alarm again. But this time it wasn't for work. Today he was checking into the hospital to give away a piece of himself to someone he'd never met. Lily was still asleep in her bed, curled up with the stuffed rabbit her mother had given her. Daniel had explained everything to her as best he could. She was scared, he could tell, but she was trying to be brave for him. That's what kids do when their parents are scared. They try to be strong. His neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, came over at 6 to stay with Lily. She'd offered to take care of his daughter for the whole week he'd be in the hospital and the first few days of home recovery. "Don't you worry about a thing," she told him, giving him a tight hug. "You're doing something beautiful. God will watch over you." The surgery took about 4 hours. Daniel didn't remember much of it, obviously. One moment he was counting backwards from 10 as the anesthesia hit his bloodstream, and the next thing he knew he was waking up in a recovery room with a nurse checking his vitals and a dull ache in his side. "How'd it go?" he managed to croak out, his throat dry from the breathing tube. The nurse smiled warmly. "Perfect. You did great. The kidney is already with the recipient and functioning beautifully. You just saved someone's life." Those words hit Daniel harder than he expected. He'd saved someone's life. While he was lying here feeling groggy and sore, somewhere in this same hospital, someone was waking up with hope they didn't have yesterday. Someone's family was crying tears of relief instead of grief. Because of him, recovery wasn't easy. The first 2 days were rough. Pain, exhaustion, difficulty moving. But Daniel had been through worse. He'd sat by his wife's hospital bed watching her slip away, powerless to help. This pain had purpose. This pain meant something. Lily visited on day 3, bringing a folder full of drawings she'd made. Pictures of hearts and flowers, and one of him wearing a cape like a superhero. She climbed carefully onto the hospital bed and snuggled against his good side, and Daniel felt his chest tighten with emotion. This was why he was here. To teach his daughter that love means sacrifice, that we help people even when it's hard. That kindness matters more than comfort. The hospital staff told him the recipient was recovering well in another part of the hospital. They offered to facilitate a meeting if both parties wanted, but for now the recipient had declined. Daniel understood. Maybe it was too overwhelming. Maybe they needed time. He wasn't doing this for thanks anyway. After 5 days, Daniel was discharged with strict instructions for recovery. No heavy lifting for 6 weeks. Take it easy. Let his body heal. His boss at the warehouse had agreed to 6 weeks unpaid leave, though Daniel could hear the irritation in his voice. His rideshare work was obviously out of the question. Money was going to be impossibly tight, but neighbors and his small community had organized meal trains and help with bills. It would be okay. Somehow it would be okay. Across the hospital, in a private recovery suite that looked nothing like the shared room Daniel had stayed in, Victoria was having a very different experience. She'd woken from surgery to her assistant hovering nearby with a laptop, her publicist asking about statements, and her executive team wanting to video conference about quarterly reports. "Get out," she'd told them all, her voice hoarse but firm. "All of you. Leave me alone." They'd looked shocked. Victoria never sent them away. But something had changed. She was lying here with someone else's kidney inside her, someone who'd given her a second chance, and her team wanted to talk about profit margins. It felt obscene. For the first time in her adult life, Victoria told work to wait. She spent her recovery days actually recovering, thinking, processing. The doctors said the kidney was working perfectly. The donor had been a perfect match. She was going to live, but what kind of life? The same empty existence she'd been living before? Back to her penthouse, her office, her endless meetings with people who feared or wanted something from her. That didn't feel like living. That felt like an expensive kind of dying. The transplant coordinator visited on day 4 with an offer. The donor had agreed to exchange letters through the hospital, if Victoria was interested. They'd maintain anonymity for now, but they could communicate. Yes, Victoria said immediately. Please, yes. That evening she received the first letter. It was handwritten on plain notebook paper, the writing a little messy but genuine. Dear friend, I hope you're recovering well and that the kidney is working the way it's supposed to. I wanted you to know that I'm honored I could help you. I have a daughter, she's 8, and I think a lot about the kind of person I want her to become. I want her to know that we help people, even strangers, because that's what makes us human. You don't owe me anything. I just hope you get many more years of life. Make them count. Best wishes, D. Victoria read that letter 5 times, tears running down her face. This man had a daughter. He was teaching her about kindness by example. He'd put his body through surgery, probably stressed his finances, risked complications, all to teach his kid about being a good person. And he'd saved Victoria's life in the process. She wrote back that same night, carefully avoiding any details that might reveal who she was. Dear D, your letter made me cry, and I don't cry easily. You've given me something I can never repay. I want you to know your daughter has an amazing father. The kind of person who gives a piece of themselves to a stranger is rare and precious. I've spent my life focused on success and money, and I'm realizing now that I missed what really matters. I promise you I'll make these extra years count. I'll try to be worthy of your gift. With deepest gratitude, V. The letters continued over the following weeks. Daniel would write about Lily's latest school project or a funny thing that happened at the grocery store. Simple, everyday things. Victoria found herself hungry for these glimpses into a normal life. She wrote back about feeling lonely despite her success, about regretting the relationships she'd sacrificed, about wanting to change but not knowing how. Their correspondence became the highlight of her recovery. This stranger understood her in ways no one else did. He didn't judge her for her mistakes. He just listened, or rather read, and wrote back with simple wisdom that came from someone who'd actually lived through loss and come out the other side. After 3 weeks of recovery, Victoria felt strong enough to venture out. Against her doctor's advice to take it slow, she put on her disguise and went back to her secret diner. She needed to see normal people living normal lives. She needed to remember what she was fighting to have. The evening crowd was there, working people grabbing cheap dinners after long shifts. The diner was warm and smelled like coffee and fried food, and Victoria felt herself relax for the first time since the surgery. Then she saw him. He was sitting in a booth with a little girl who was showing him something on a piece of paper. The man looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes, but he was smiling at his daughter with pure love. And Victoria knew, she just knew. The way he moved carefully, favoring his left side. The healing surgical scar she could just barely see at his collar when he leaned forward. The gentle patience in his voice as he praised whatever his daughter was showing him. This was her donor. It had to be. The letters had mentioned an 8-year-old daughter. The timeline matched. The protective way he touched his side when he shifted positions that way. It's exactly how Victoria herself moved. She sat frozen at the counter, her coffee forgotten, just watching them. This man had saved her life. He was right there, eating a cheap diner dinner with his daughter because he probably couldn't afford anywhere nicer after taking all that unpaid leave to donate his kidney. To her. A billionaire who could buy this entire restaurant chain without blinking. The injustice of it hit Victoria like a punch. This good man was struggling while she had more money than she could spend. And she couldn't even go over and thank him because they were supposed to be anonymous. The little girl, Lily, suddenly knocked over her water glass. It splashed across the table and onto the floor, and she looked mortified. Her father immediately started helping clean up, reassuring her that accidents happen, not upset at all. Just patient and kind. Victoria's waitress friend rushed over with towels, and in the commotion, the man looked up and his eyes met Victoria's. She was still wearing her baseball cap in disguise, but something passed between them. A moment of connection. He gave her a small, tired smile, the kind strangers share when they're both having a long day. Victoria smiled back, her heart pounding. She wanted to say something, do something, but what? The whole point of anonymous donation was to avoid this kind of situation. But watching him carefully count out bills from his wallet to pay for their modest dinner, watching him help his daughter into her jacket, watching them walk out into the night, probably heading home to worry about bills and recovery, Victoria felt something crack open in her chest. She couldn't let this be the end of their story. She couldn't just take his kidney and go back to her isolated life while he struggled. But she also couldn't reveal herself without violating the program's rules and potentially making him uncomfortable. That night, Victoria wrote another letter. In it, she asked if he'd ever consider meeting in person. She said she needed to thank him face to face, that the letters had meant everything to her recovery, that she felt a connection she couldn't quite explain. Daniel received the letter 3 days later. He'd been back at work for a week, doing light duty at the warehouse, still recovering but needing the money. His side still ached sometimes and he got tired faster than before, but overall he felt good. He felt purposeful. Reading the request to meet made his stomach flip. Part of him wanted to keep the relationship exactly as it was, pure and uncomplicated. But another part of him was curious. Who was this person he'd saved? What were they like? The letters had revealed someone lonely and searching, someone who seemed to have everything except what mattered. He found himself caring about them, wanting to know they were okay. He wrote back, "I'd like to meet you too. Let's do it." They arranged to meet at a coffee shop near the hospital, neutral territory. Victoria suggested it and Daniel agreed. He told Mrs. Patterson he had an important appointment and asked if she could watch Lily for a few hours. He put on his best shirt, the one he wore to his wife's funeral and hadn't worn since, and tried to calm his nerves. What he didn't know was that Victoria had changed her mind at the last minute. She wanted to meet him desperately, but not as Victoria Ashford, CEO. Not yet. She wasn't ready for that reveal. She wanted one more moment of being just V, just a person, before the weight of her identity changed everything. So she showed up in her diner disguise, baseball cap, old jeans, plain jacket. She spotted Daniel immediately. He was sitting at a corner table looking nervous and excited. He'd brought a photo of his daughter. She could see it on the table. Victoria's heart was pounding as she approached. This was it. The moment she'd been both anticipating and dreading. "D," she said quietly. He looked up and his face went through several emotions at once. Confusion, recognition, surprise. "Wait," he said slowly. You're the woman from the diner. The one who always sits at the counter." Victoria nodded, sliding into the seat across from him. "I've been there a lot lately. It's my favorite place." They stared at each other for a long moment. "You're my recipient," Daniel said. Not a question, but a realization. "The letters. That was you." "That was me," Victoria confirmed, her voice shaking slightly. "You saved my life." And just like that, the anonymous stranger became real. They ordered coffee, neither of them drank, and talked for 3 hours. Victoria told him about her diagnosis, her fear, her loneliness. She told him about finding the diner and feeling human there for the first time in years. She didn't mention her company or her money yet. That could wait. For now, she just wanted to be V, talking to D, two people connected by an extraordinary act of kindness. Daniel told her about his wife, about raising Lily alone, about deciding to donate because he couldn't save his own family, but maybe he could save someone else's. He told her about the letters and how they'd helped him during recovery, giving him someone to share his thoughts with who actually listened. As the coffee shop was closing and they were being politely asked to leave, Victoria knew she had to tell him the truth. All of it, but not tonight. Tonight had been perfect, human, real. She'd tell him everything soon, and she'd figure out how to help him without making it weird, how to give back without taking away his dignity. "Can we do this again?" she asked as they stood on the sidewalk outside. Daniel smiled, and it lit up his whole tired face. "Yeah," he said. "I'd like that." They exchanged phone numbers, real ones this time, not through the hospital coordinator. As Victoria watched him walk to his beat-up car, she touched the scar on her side where his kidney now lived, and she made a silent promise. She would find a way to make this right. Victoria couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. 3 days had passed since their coffee shop meeting, and she'd replayed their conversation 100 times in her mind. The way he talked about his daughter with such pure love. The quiet strength in how he described losing his wife and keeping going. The fact that he'd never once asked for anything, even though it was obvious he was struggling. She sat in her office high above the city, but her mind kept drifting to that diner. To the simple booth where she'd seen Daniel and Lily, living their small but meaningful life. She'd built an empire, but he'd built something better. He'd built a home, a relationship, a purpose that wasn't tied to money or power. The guilt was eating her alive. This man had given her a kidney, taken unpaid leave from work, put his body through surgery, and she was sitting here in her designer chair with more money than she knew what to do with. It felt obscene, wrong. She needed to help him, but how could she do it without revealing who she was and making everything weird? Her assistant knocked on her door. "Ms. Ashford, your 2 o'clock is here." Victoria waved her away. "Cancel it. Cancel everything today." The assistant looked shocked but backed out quickly. Victoria pulled out her phone and found Daniel's number. Before she could overthink it, she texted, "Hey, it's V. Are you free for lunch tomorrow?" "There's something I need to tell you." His response came 20 minutes later. "Sure, same coffee place? Around noon?" Victoria stared at the message. "No, not the coffee place." She needed to do this right. She typed back, "Actually, can you meet me at this address?" She sent him the location of Ashford Hospitality Group headquarters. "I know it's strange, but please trust me." There was a long pause before his reply. "Okay, see you there." That night, Victoria barely slept. She rehearsed what she'd say a dozen different ways. How do you tell someone you're not who they think you are? How do you reveal that the anonymous recipient they saved is actually a billionaire who could have paid them life-changing money but didn't because of program rules and pride and fear? The next morning, she stood in front of her closet and faced a choice. Power suit or regular clothes? Be the CEO or be V? In the end, she chose somewhere in between. Professional but not intimidating. She needed Daniel to see that both versions of her were real. At 11:45, her assistant informed her that a Daniel Chen was in the lobby. Victoria's heart started racing. Send him up. She stood by the windows looking out at the city when she heard her office door open. She turned around slowly. Daniel stood in the doorway looking completely out of place in his work jeans and button-up shirt. His eyes were wide as he took in the massive office, the expensive furniture, the view that cost more per month than most people's mortgages. He looked at Victoria, really looked at her, and she saw the moment understanding started to dawn. "V," he said uncertainly. "Come in," Victoria said softly. "Please, close the door." He did, moving slowly into the office like he was walking through a dream. "I don't understand. What is this place? Why are we here?" Victoria gestured to the seating area by the windows, away from her imposing desk. They sat down across from each other and she took a deep breath. "My full name is Victoria Ashford," she began. "This is my company, Ashford Hospitality Group. I own it." Daniel just stared at her. "Wait, Ashford Hospitality? Like the restaurant chain?" "There's one of those near where I work. Big corporation, hundreds of locations. 347 locations, actually," Victoria said quietly. "In 15 states." The color drained from Daniel's face. "You're rich. Like really rich?" "Yes. And you're the woman I gave my kidney to. The one who wrote me letters about being lonely and wanting to change?" "Yes." Daniel stood up abruptly and walked to the windows, his back to her. "Me?" Victoria could see his shoulders tense. The silence stretched out painfully. "Why didn't you tell me?" he finally asked, his voice tight. "Because I liked being just V," Victoria admitted. "For the first time in 20 years, someone was talking to me like I was just a person. Not a CEO or a business opportunity or someone to impress. Just a person. And I wasn't ready to give that up." Daniel turned around and his expression was hard to read. "Do you know what the last few months have been like for me? I took 6 weeks unpaid leave. I drained my savings. I'm behind on bills. I'm eating pasta 3 nights a week so Lily can have decent lunches at school." "And you're a billionaire?" "I know how it looks," Victoria said, standing up. "But the program has strict rules about anonymity. I couldn't just hand you money. That would violate everything about living donation ethics." "Ethics?" Daniel's voice rose slightly. "You let me struggle while you sat in your tower. You could have helped me, told me who you were, but you wanted to play normal person for a while." "It wasn't like that," Victoria said, her voice cracking. I didn't know it was you until I saw you at the diner. And by then we'd been writing letters and I didn't know how to tell you without ruining everything. So instead you just watched me? Watched me struggle? No. I mean, yes, but not like that. Victoria felt tears forming, which shocked her. She never cried. Daniel, you gave me my life back. Not just the kidney, but the letters, the conversations. You reminded me what it means to be human. I was terrified that if you knew who I really was, you'd see me differently. You'd want something from me like everyone else does. Or worse, you'd feel obligated to be grateful to someone who didn't deserve it. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. What do you mean, didn't deserve it? Victoria sat back down heavily. You're good. You're genuinely good. You work 2 jobs to take care of your daughter. You gave a kidney to a stranger. You write letters about teaching kindness and meaning what matters. And me? I spent 20 years building a business empire and forgetting how to be a decent person. I have a brother who won't talk to me. No friends. No life outside work. I didn't deserve your kidney. Someone like you should have saved someone like you. That's not how it works, Daniel said quietly, coming back to sit down. I didn't donate because you deserved it. I donated because you needed it. Everyone deserves to live. They sat in silence. Victoria wiped her eyes, angry at herself for losing composure. I'm sorry, she finally said. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I'm sorry you've been struggling. I'm sorry I'm not the person you thought I was from the letters. But you are that person, Daniel said slowly. The letters were real, right? The loneliness, the wanting to change, all of that was true? Every word. Then you're both people. The CEO and the lonely woman in the diner, just like I'm both a kidney donor and a guy struggling to pay his bills. He ran his hand through his hair. I just need a minute to process this. This is a lot. Take all the time you need, Victoria said. And Daniel, I want to help you. Not as payment for the kidney because I could never repay that, but because we're friends now and friends help each other. Daniel looked at her sharply. I don't want charity. It's not charity. Let me finish, Victoria leaned forward. I've been thinking about this for days. I want to create a foundation, a nonprofit that helps single parents and families affected by kidney disease. I want to hire someone to run it, someone who actually understands what these families go through, someone who's lived it. You want to hire me? Daniel asked, suspicion in his voice. I want to offer you a job, Victoria corrected. A real job with a real salary and benefits and purpose. You'd be helping people like yourself, creating support programs, connecting families with resources. You have experience I can never buy. You know what it's like to be on the other side of all this. Daniel was quiet, thinking. What's the catch? No catch. Well, one condition. You have to promise to keep calling me out when I'm being a terrible person. You have to stay honest with me. Everyone else in my life either fears me or wants something from me. I need at least one person who will tell me the truth. A small smile tugged at Daniel's mouth. You really are lonely, aren't you? Desperately, Victoria admitted. I have everything except what matters. And you have what matters, but you're drowning trying to keep it. Maybe we can help each other. Daniel stood up and walked around the office, processing. Victoria waited, her heart pounding. She'd laid all her cards on the table. No more secrets, no more hiding. Just the truth. Messy and complicated as it was. Finally, he turned back to her. I need time to think about the job offer. It's a lot to consider, but V? He used her letter nickname and it made her throat tight. Thank you for being honest. I'm not sure how I feel about all this yet, but I appreciate you telling me the truth. Can we still be friends? Victoria asked, hating how vulnerable she sounded. Yeah, Daniel said, and he meant it. We're still friends. Friends who have a really weird story, but friends. As he was leaving, Victoria called out, Daniel, the foundation is happening whether you take the job or not, but I really hope you'll consider it. Not for me. For all the other people out there who need what we've learned. He nodded and left. Victoria stood alone in her massive office, looking out at the city below. She'd revealed herself completely, and she had no idea if Daniel would accept her offer or walk away. But for the first time in years, she'd been completely honest with another person. No business masks, no carefully managed image. Just the truth. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Can Lily and I take you to dinner at our favorite diner? Nothing fancy. Just dinner with friends. Let us treat you for once, Victoria laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. She texted back, I'd love that. But I'm buying. And before you argue, friends let friends buy dinner sometimes. His response, fine, but only if you promise to order the pie. It's really good, Victoria smiled at her phone. Maybe this was what having a real friend felt like. Maybe it wasn't too late for her after all. She'd spent 20 years building a business empire and lost herself in the process. But Daniel, with his simple goodness and honest letters, had given her more than a kidney. He'd given her a mirror to see herself clearly, and a map to find her way back to being human. She looked at her calendar, full of meaningless meetings, and started canceling them. If she was going to change, she needed to start now. And the first change was simple: making time for the people who actually mattered. That evening, sitting in a diner booth across from Daniel and Lily, eating pie and listening to an 8-year-old explain her science project, Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt like she belonged somewhere, like she was part of something real. And when Lily asked innocently, "Are you my daddy's girlfriend?" Victoria and Daniel both laughed awkwardly, and Lily grinned like she just discovered a big secret. "No, sweetie," Daniel said gently. "We're just friends." But the way he smiled at Victoria and the way she smiled back suggested that maybe, someday, they might figure out what they were becoming. For now, though, friends was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 3 months passed after that dinner at the diner, and everything changed slowly, the way real change always does. Daniel accepted the job running Victoria's foundation after thinking about it for 2 weeks. He'd sat Lily down and explained that they might be moving into a better apartment, that Daddy would have 1 job instead of 2, that things were going to get easier. Lily had cried happy tears and asked if Aunt Vicky, as she'd started calling Victoria, would visit their new place. The foundation became Daniel's purpose in a way that surprised even him. He poured everything he'd learned from his own struggle into creating programs that actually helped people. Support groups for single parents going through medical crises, emergency funds for families who couldn't afford to take time off work, connections to resources that people like him never knew existed until it was too late. Victoria gave him complete control, which shocked her board of directors. They'd expected her to micromanage, to demand reports and metrics and profit projections. But this wasn't about profit. This was about people, and Daniel understood people in ways Victoria never would. She did show up to the foundation office sometimes, though, not to boss anyone around, but to listen, to hear stories from the families they helped, to remember why this mattered. The first time a single mother hugged her and said, "You saved my family," Victoria had to excuse herself to the bathroom to cry. She was getting better at crying. Daniel said that was progress. Their friendship deepened in ways neither of them expected. Victoria started coming to Lily's school events, sitting in the audience while an 8-year-old performed in the class play or science fair. She'd never been to a school event in her life, and she was shocked by how much joy she got from watching Lily beam when she spotted her in the crowd. Daniel helped Victoria reconnect with her brother. It wasn't easy. Years of resentment and hurt feelings don't disappear overnight. But Daniel convinced her to write a letter, just like the ones they'd exchanged through the hospital. No business talk, no money, just honest feelings. Her brother wrote back after 3 weeks. They met for coffee. It was awkward and painful, but it was a start. "Why are you doing this?" Victoria's brother asked.